Hey, welcome back to Life on the Wrist. Hope you're doing well. We're going to continue our series on the common questions that I receive from people about watches, being that I am a watch lover. We made a video previously. I'll put a link into the description to the first video we made. Our second common question that I receive about watches is, what watch should I buy? This is a very tough question to answer, and in order for me to do that, if you wouldn't mind hitting that like button, I'll give you a little bit of extra motivation. But like this video, subscribe to our channel if you want to see other videos that we make about watches. We talk about all kinds of things when it's related to watches, from independent watch companies to explaining different types of watch movements, watch reviews, all that kind of stuff. So subscribe to our channel if you're interested. So this question is a really hard question to answer. I mean, it's almost like saying, what outfit should I wear? It's very hard, or what car should I buy, or what degree should I pursue at university? It's a hard question to answer because I don't know. I may not know everything about you. I may not know the types of tastes that you are interested in, or the types of items that you like to wear on your wrist. I can obviously gauge by looking at you and perhaps spending a little bit of time with you, but it's a hard question to ask because there's so many factors that can contribute to the answer that I give. So in order to navigate through this, in order to answer this question in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the four main categories that I think I would go through in order to identify what types of factors affect you, and how I would approach all of them. And I'll give you a few suggestions on the ways in which the different types of watches you can go for each of these different contributing factors. So the first one is, and I think this is just because I'm a vintage watch lover, is that I want to identify whether or not you like vintage or modern watches. So first is vintage or modern. The reason for this is because, if you're a modern person, you like everything to be quite new, you're not going to want to buy something that's, from the 60s or 70s. Likewise, if you're interested in that type of historical, reference piece on your wrist, then, identifying a vintage piece for you would be more suitable. The second is, and it's arguably the most important factor that contributes to answering the question of what watch should I buy, is the budget. A lot of people don't like talking about money, but in the end, it's really, you need to have a specific amount of money to buy specific watches. So identifying the correct budget that you would like to spend is super important. So just as some examples, if you're looking at a lower budget of anywhere from $0 to $1,000, I think some of the watches that present really great value that I would personally recommend for you is the Swatch System 51. Hands down, one of the coolest pieces ever. It's made of 51. The movement is made out of 51 components, and they have some really great styles of it. So you're getting a really great horological piece, but also something that looks quite stylish, and you can find something that fits your aesthetic. Also, there's really common watches that people go for in this price range. Seiko, namely the Seiko Skx, is a super good watch to consider. It's tried and true. People who have $100,000 in watches also own an SKX, so it's not like, just because you can't afford watches from higher price ranges doesn't mean you shouldn't have an SKX. Also, Tissot presents some really great value. They have great history. I've made videos about Tissot and why I think they're a great watch to consider. And then if you're looking at if you answered vintage to the first question, vintage Omega, vintage Longines, vintage JLC, I've spoken at length about those types of watches, and I think they present great value under that $1,000 mark for you if you're looking at a lower budget but also interested in vintage watches. Then you have your kind of middle ground, where you're looking at companies like Baume Mercier, Tag Heuer, Rolex, and Omega to an extent, probably on the upper end of that medium range. If you're looking for something a little bit more vintage looking, you could look at like vintage chronographs from Universal Geneve, or pole routers, or there's really great options in the vintage world, especially in that kind of middle ground area. And obviously, if you're looking at a higher budget, anything over, let's say, $6,000 to $15,000 US, you can look at Jaeger LeCoultre with reversos, or some of their more complicated pieces. You can also look at Cartier. They have the tanks, as well as the Santos, the great options. And then obviously you can look at maybe an entry-level Holy Trinity piece, namely an Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe, and Vacheron Constantin. So that's kind of your higher end that I would recommend to the person asking me this question. And then you can look at, your Uber pieces, a little bit more in the sky. You can look at companies that are independent, which I think are really, really an awesome way to get into watches if you're looking at modern pieces. As you know, I'm a huge MB&F fan, so you could look into getting an entry-level MB&F that go for about 30,000, or you could look at higher end Untitled Chapter or Holy Trinity, perhaps maybe a special piece from Rolex. There's so many options you can go through, but the budget is so wide, and I'm kind of spitting out these names, and it's probably a little bit overwhelming for you, but the reason why I'm doing that is to show it's such a hard question to answer. Budget is definitely a factor that you must consider. The third factor that you need to consider is the type of watch that you want. Now, there's so many ways you can break down type. You could break it down classic versus sport. Are you looking for a JLC time-only watch or a Rolex stainless steel sports model? Are you looking for complication or just a time-only watch? Perhaps getting a Tudor chronograph with that complication, or are you looking at the Tag Heuer Tavia? There's so many ways to break this down. You could look at casual versus formal, quartz versus manual wine. There's so many different ways you can break this out, and these are the probing questions that I would probably ask you to figure out what watch I would recommend for you to get. And then the fourth factor and the last factor that to consider is the taste. I want to understand what type of taste you have and what would you be comfortable wearing on your wrist. So this can be things like the size of the watch. Are you looking for a 36 millimeter Universal Genève chronograph from the 1960s, or are you looking for something a little bit bigger, nice, Rolex Explorer at 41 millimeters? There's so many different ways you can break this down. So that's, the size of the watch you need to consider. Also, you need to consider the material of the case that you're going to buy. Are you looking for a stainless steel sports watch, or are you looking for a rose gold Untitled Chapter? There's so many different factors within taste you should consider. But the four things that I would probably probe in order to answer this question that I get is first, vintage versus modern, your budget, the type of watch that you're looking for, and then the taste of the person who is asking me. That way I can kind of formalize the right way, the right answer to this question. Just to give you an overview of the watches that I think present a really great value and I would probably recommend at the top of my list. The first is the Swatch System 51. I think this is the perfect entry-level watches you can get from a watch with a decent history as well as a really cool movement history. If you're looking at vintage watches, you can look at vintage Omega, vintage Longines, vintage Untitled Chapter, vintage Universal Genève. These are places where you can find really outstanding watches. Also vintage Breitling if you're into watches like that. Obviously, if you're looking at something a little bit more robust, Rolex sports models are a great way to get into watches. And then obviously, and this is my biggest recommendation, if you're in a position where you can buy more expensive pieces, look into micro and independent watch companies. They are a way that you can differentiate yourself, but also get a really cool piece from these people who are live and breathe this industry, and in my opinion, make this industry thrive and are trying to differentiate themselves and move our industry along. So to sum up again, you want to, when asked what watch I should buy by someone who thinks I need to give them a recommendation on a watch, there are four things I consider. Are you looking for vintage versus modern? Are you looking for what is your budget that you're willing to spend on this watch, the type of watch that you're looking for, and your personal taste and what you would feel comfortable with on your wrist. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below if this is the way you would approach this question. What types of watches would you recommend to people who ask you this question? And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel, and I hope you guys have a nice rest of your day.